The 9:40 p.m. secret. Imagine for a second that your entire life, every secret you ever kept, every fear that kept you awake at night, and every final movement you made, could be distilled down to 8 tiny numbers on a digital screen. It's February 1st, 2021. Outside, the South Shore of Massachusetts is getting hammered by a brutal winter storm. It's the kind of nor'easter that turns the world silent, burying the streets of Canton in a heavy, suffocating blanket of white. Inside a quiet apartment at the Canton Woods complex, 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore is alone. Or at least, that's what her neighbors believe as they hunkered down for the night. But at exactly 9:40 p.m., something happens that will haunt the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for years. Sandra's iPhone Health app registers 8 steps. Just 8. Those are the final movements she will ever make. They are the digital footprints of a woman whose life is about to be extinguished in the dark. 3 minutes later, a man is captured on grainy surveillance footage walking out of that building. He's wearing a heavy hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low, and a blue medical mask. He doesn't run. He walks with the steady, measured confidence of someone who knows exactly where the cameras are and exactly how to avoid looking directly into them. He doesn't look like a common criminal. He looks like someone you'd call when you're in trouble. He looks like a protector. But 3 days later, when Sandra's co-workers at the Sharon Public Elementary School realize she hasn't shown up for her shift, the police arrive to conduct a well-being check. They break down the door and find a scene that looks like a tragic open and shut case. Sandra is seated on the floor of her bedroom, a luggage strap looped around her neck and tied to a doorknob. The initial report from the Massachusetts State Police: suicide, no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, just a young woman who couldn't handle the weight of the world anymore. Except the feds were watching, and what they found wasn't a tragedy of mental health, it was a forensic blueprint for a staged execution. Welcome to Plain Verdict. Today we are pulling back the curtain on a case that broke the trust of an entire community and exposed a rot that goes all the way to the top. If you believe that no one, especially those behind a badge, should be above the law, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. You won't want to miss a single second of the evidence we're about to uncover. By the way, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? Drop your city and state in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel and which communities are standing with us for justice. As we dive into the dark corners of the South Shore, keep those final 8 steps in mind. Because while the local authorities were ready to bury the file, the digital trail was getting started. To understand why Sandra Birchmore ended up on that bedroom floor, we have to go back way before the snowstorm of 2021. We have to go back to 2010. Sandra was just 12 years old, a middle schooler in Stoughton, Massachusetts, looking for a sense of direction. She wasn't your typical kid. Her mother, Denise, suffered from a chronic illness, and Sandra had spent much of her childhood as a caretaker. Relatives say she was never really brought up like a child. She was a young adult at an early age. She was ambitious, but in the words of her colleagues, she came across like a child without parents that needed help. In 2010, Sandra thought she found her village. She enrolled in the Stoughton Police Explorers program. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Explorers is a vocational mentorship program. It's where townie kids go to learn the ropes of the job. You learn about forensics, you learn about patrol procedures, and theoretically you learn about integrity. But for Sandra, the Stoughton PD wasn't a classroom, it was a hunting ground. Enter Matthew Farwell. In 2010, he was a 24-year-old volunteer and instructor for the program. He was the cool mentor. To a 13-year-old girl who just wanted someone to be proud of her, Farwell was a hero. But federal prosecutors now allege that the hero was actually a master manipulator who spent a decade carefully dismantling a child's boundaries. The grooming didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing erosion. He wasn't the only one. As the investigation eventually revealed, the institutional decay in Stoughton went deep. It wasn't a secret, it was a culture. Farwell's twin brother, William, also an officer, and Deputy Chief Robert Devine were also reportedly entangled in inappropriate predatory relationships with Sandra. While they were on duty wearing uniforms paid for by the taxpayers, they were allegedly exploiting a vulnerable young woman they had trained since she was in middle school. This wasn't just a few bad apples, it was a systemic failure of oversight. Records later showed that scouting leaders never conducted evaluations to make sure these armed officers were safe to be alone with teenagers. What's the weather like today in your city? It was a bone-cold, eerie winter in Massachusetts when this case first hit the headlines. Let me know if you're staying warm while we go through this, because the details of how Sandra was treated are enough to make anyone's blood run cold. Sandra's life during these years was a nightmare of digital and physical control. Farwell was a married man with 3 kids, but he maintained a tight grip on Sandra. He tracked her location using her phone. He allegedly used violent sex acts as punishment if she had the audacity to see other people or if her grades slipped. He even demanded she role-play as a rape victim during their encounters. He turned her life into a cage, using the job as the bars. But in late 2020, the cage door finally started to creak open. Sandra found out she was pregnant. In the world of modern crime, there is a golden rule: the cloud never forgets. When federal authorities eventually seized Sandra's devices, 2 iPhones and a laptop, they hit a goldmine of evidence. They found over 32,000 text messages between her and Matthew Farwell. This wasn't just a digital trail, it was a diary of a decade-long betrayal. The messages from December 2020 show a terrifying escalation. Sandra was roughly 2 months pregnant, and she believed with every fibre of her being that Farwell was the father. She was excited. She was booking prenatal appointments that post-dated her own death. She was searching Google for baby names and planning an official pregnancy announcement for Valentine's Day. She even had a specific daycare cost in mind, thousands of dollars, and she expected Farwell to pay up. But for Farwell, that pregnancy was a ticking time bomb. It was the one piece of evidence he couldn't fix or lose in an evidence locker. A baby meant a paper trail. It meant a birth certificate. It meant the end of his career, his marriage, and his freedom. The texts reveal a pregnancy for silence agreement. Farwell allegedly agreed to stay in the child's life as long as Sandra never, ever mentioned the statutory rape that started when she was 15. But Sandra was done being the secret. She wanted a life for her son. She told Farwell she was keeping it, and that the birth certificate is being signed. His response: "You are truly the worst person on the face of the earth." That is the motive, plain and simple: silencing a witness who could no longer be controlled. If you are finding this story as haunting as I am, please take a moment to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this is a story that needs to be seen, and it helps us get justice for victims like Sandra who were silenced by the very people supposed to protect them. On January 20th, 2021, the bomb finally went off. A friend of Sandra's called the Stoughton Police Department. They didn't just hint at the truth, they told an officer exactly what was happening, that a detective in their own department was in an illicit relationship with a former explorer. Farwell found out about the call almost immediately from a co-worker. He was enraged. He sent Sandra a text that was essentially a final warning: "What else do I have to worry about now?" He knew the blue wall of silence was starting to crack. He knew that the only way to keep his life from imploding was to make sure Sandra Birchmore could never speak again. As the nor'easter approached, he began researching how to delete iPhone messages and scoping out her apartment for the perfect way to stage a tragedy. February 1st, 2021. The storm is peaking. The snow is falling so fast you can barely see the tail lights of the cars on the road. Suddenly, Farwell does a complete 180. At 9:14 p.m., the surveillance cameras at Canton Woods capture a tall man entering the building. He's wearing that blue mask, the hoodie, and a cap. He knows the layout. He knows where the cameras are. What happened inside that apartment wasn't a suicide. We know this because of the science the state police chose to ignore. Inside, Farwell allegedly strangled Sandra Birchmore. He didn't just kill her, he used his training as a detective to process the scene before he left. He positioned her body on the floor by the bedroom closet. He looped a luggage strap around her neck and tied it to the handle. He made it look like a woman who had simply given up. Then he walked out at 9:43 p.m., exactly 3 minutes after those final 8 steps were recorded on her phone. When the Canton Police and the Mass State Police arrived 3 days later, they saw exactly what Farwell wanted them to see. They didn't see a struggle. They didn't see the bruises. They saw a suicide and moved on. But there were things they missed. Glaring, obvious things that a first-year cadet should have caught. On the floor near the bed was Sandra's pink flamingo necklace. The chain was snapped with violent force and a tangle of her hair was caught in the clasp. That isn't what happens in a quiet, self-inflicted end. That's what happens in a fight for your life. Even more damning was an imprint found on Sandra's chest. Advanced forensic imaging used by the FBI revealed a mark from a tactical strap buckle. Here's the catch. When the police found her, that buckle was nowhere near her chest. It was near her ear. The only way that imprint could be there is if she was assaulted and crushed before her body was moved into that final, staged position. Despite these red flags, the state medical examiner ruled it a suicide. They stood by it for 3 years. It took a federal grand jury and the FBI to say out loud what the community had been whispering. This was a homicide. I'm curious, what time is it there as you're watching this? Time is such a critical factor in this case. The difference between 9:40 and 9:43 p.m. is the difference between an alibi and a murder charge. Let me know the time in the comments. You might be asking yourself, how does a detective in a quiet Massachusetts town think he can get away with this for so long? The answer is that the 2025 investigative cycle has shown us that the protector-predator dynamic is a global crisis. Sandra Birchmore's case isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a harrowing pattern of institutional decay where the people in power use their sovereignty to hunt the vulnerable. Look at what's happening 5,000 miles away in Abuja, Nigeria. Investigators there are currently untangling the web of former central bank governor Godwin Emefiele. He's accused of using his massive authority to facilitate a monumental fraud, acquiring a multi-billion-naira estate in Lokogoma with 753 luxury duplexes built on the backs of currency manipulation and kickbacks. While the average citizen struggled to put food on the table, the protector of the national economy was allegedly building a private empire. Then you have the Christie Gold Syndicate. Christiana Jacob Uhdale, a high-profile socialite, was arrested at the Abuja airport on New Year's Eve after years of running a human trafficking pipeline to Dubai. She used social media to recruit young women with promises of lucrative hospitality jobs, only to throw them into debt bondage in the UAE. Her enforcers, including her own brother, used a literal torture room to ensure silence. They flogged victims and even inserted hot, chili paste into their private areas to break their spirits. Even in the digital space, the predators are operating right in Sandra's backyard. Charles Uchenna Nwodavid, an Abuja-based national, was recently sentenced in a Massachusetts federal court for orchestrating a romance scam that defrauded victims of over $2.5 million. He used their trust as a weapon, manipulating a Massachusetts resident into acting as a money mule to funnel stolen funds into cryptocurrency accounts on local bitcoins. What connects all these cases? It's the exploitation of trust. Whether it's a detective in Canton, a bank governor in Abuja, or a trafficking ringleader in Dubai, these predators rely on the same thing: the belief that the systems designed to keep us safe will actually protect the ones in charge. This is the mission of Plain Verdict: to hold these predators accountable, no matter how much power they think they have or what uniform they wear. Stories like this remind us why accountability matters. Comment the word justice below if you want to see more cases like this investigated to the fullest extent. The 2025 investigative cycle has been about the forensic reconstruction of truth. We are finally entering an era where a health app or a coordinate search in a geographical information system can dismantle a lie, no matter how many people are trying to protect it. In June of 2025, a bombshell dropped that changed the entire emotional weight of the Sandra Birchmore story. The DNA results came back. Remember, Matthew Farwell allegedly killed Sandra because he believed, as she did, that he was the father of her baby. He killed her to protect his marriage, his career, and his reputation. He was willing to end 2 lives to keep his secret buried in the snow. But the post-mortem DNA analysis revealed a cruel, final irony. Matthew Farwell was not the biological father. Sandra had been so groomed, so manipulated, and so emotionally stunted by a decade of abuse that she had built her entire future on a premise that wasn't even true. She was trapped in a cycle of control so tight that she couldn't see the reality of her own life. Farwell had committed a murder-suicide staging to hide a secret that didn't even exist. As we look toward the trial in October 2026, the stakes couldn't be higher. Farwell is being charged federally with killing a witness, a charge that in some cases can carry a potential death penalty, although federal prosecutors have recently indicated they may not seek it. He has pleaded not guilty, and his defense team is already trying to move the trial, claiming there's too much pre-trial media coverage. But you have to wonder, what does it say about the Massachusetts justice system that the state medical examiner still refuses to change the cause of death to homicide? Even with the strap buckle imprint, even with the snapped necklace, and even with the digital timeline that obliterates Farwell's alibi, the state is still digging in its heels. This is the blue wall in its most stubborn form. It's not just about protecting one disgraced officer, it's about protecting the validity of the initial investigation. Because if the state admits they were wrong about Sandra, they have to admit they were wrong about a lot of other things. The Stoughton PD has seen massive fallout. 3 officers have resigned. Chief Donna McNamara has pushed for reforms, including entering these officers into the National Decertification Index to ensure they never wear a badge again. But for Sandra's family, who filed a massive wrongful death lawsuit, the reforms are 3 years too late. Sandra Birchmore wanted to be a cop. She wanted to be a protector. Instead, she became the ultimate victim of the people she admired most. Her story is a warning to every department in the country that mentorship without oversight is just grooming with a different name. This case is far from over. As we head into the 2026 trial, Plain Verdict will be here to bring you every update and every piece of evidence. What do you think was the biggest failure of the justice system in this case? Was it the grooming, the initial investigation, or the refusal to admit the truth? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video to keep Sandra's story alive. Thank you for watching. I'm out.